Hello, friends. Welcome. Phyllis, it's so good to see you.
Hi.
Hi. How have you been?
Yeah, meh. Don't even go there. It's been a bit up and down.
Oh, oops. Sorry. I just realized I just plugged in my headset right when you started to talk, and so I missed it. Say it one more time.
I was saying it's been real up and down.
Yeah.
Had a bit of a time of it. Lost my father last year.
Mm.
But yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So he'd been really ill. So that's a lot of what stopped me from completing whatever. But anyway, so we lost him in October, and
I'm
we've
so
just had a
sorry,
diagnosis
Phyllis.
of Alzheimer's from my mum.
God, you have had a hard time. That's a lot to carry. How are you?
I'm okay. I'm trying to be kind to myself. Hence why I thought I'd turn up today. This would
I'm
be
so
nice.
glad you did. I'm so glad you did, Phyllis.
Oh,
You
thank
are
you.
always welcome here. Our hearts are with you.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. It's I know it's just tough being a citizen of the world
Yeah.
right now, and made even tougher when those around you aren't well. So, yeah.
Yeah.
My heart goes out to you. If you need anyone to talk to, I'm always here for you.
Oh, thank you. That's beautiful. Thank you.
You're welcome. We'll give everybody just another couple of minutes to file in. I know Catherine and Anna are joining us again today, and a couple others, hopefully. So in the meantime, I'd love everyone to open their chat box, which is just down at the bottom of the screen. You'll see the little chat icon. And in the part where it says type message here, tell us what you see outside your window. And if you don't have a window, just tell us what you see in the room where you are right now. Just a sentence or two is fine. Oh, beautiful Catalina. Will you describe her?
Well, I just gave her something to eat, and now she is just sitting in the bed and looking at me, I guess.
Like more, bring me more.
Yeah, and she has some wonderful blue eyes, which are,
Oh, that's beautiful.
yeah.
I loved the picture you posted today of you as a little girl.
Thank you. Yeah, my mom gave it to me in the morning, and it was like, yes, not quite yesterday, but in a way. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Kate sees a plywood lean to but and wisteria arbor just launching blooms. Oh, what a great springtime.
Plywood lean-to. Yeah.
Oh, lean-to. I'm sorry. I was like lean-to, but and. That's a lot of prepositions. I love it. Okay, plywood lean-to, of course. That is such a spring image, just launching blooms, an embarrassment of riches. I love it. Phyllis, my neighbor's house outside one, and my hypericum tree outside the other. Did I pronounce that right? I should just let you guys read these. Behind the computer, one of my favorite prints of a mother holding her child. Oh, Phyllis, it's beautiful. Daniel, we're just spending the first couple minutes writing about what we see either outside our window, or if we don't have a window, what we see in the room right around us. I'm going to give everybody another minute or two to hop on. I know we have a couple others who intend to join us. All right, it's 1:05, so go ahead and keep posting if you haven't posted yet. I think it's really good for, well, I should only speak for myself here, but it's good for me right now to feel grounded in my immediate atmosphere, because I know the past couple of weeks have been very ungrounding for a lot of us. So I'm hoping that today we can find that stability here together, specifically by looking at a work by a Ukrainian poet. Normally I have a slideshow for you guys, but this poem exceeds a slideshow. It's not possible to put it in that format. I'm so excited to share this with you because it's as much visual art as it is poetry and something else as well that I don't know how to put my fingers on, and I'm sure you guys will help me do it. So I'm going to, in a moment, share my screen, and we're going to look at the poem together, and we're going to scroll through it together, and we're going to listen to the poet read it herself. But I'm also going to post it in the chat box here so that you can open it up in a separate tab if you'd like, so that as we're doing our close reading later on, you can jump back and refer to the poem on your own, and look for phrases and words that you want the group to see. And of course, on the main screen here, I can then scroll to show those words or phrases to the group as a whole. So here's the link to the poem. Now I'm going to share my screen. All right. So before we read the poem, I'd like us to read a little bit about the author. Since we're going to hear the author herself read her own work, I'd like to have a volunteer today just read this about section from the author herself. Can I have a volunteer who will read this aloud for us? Phyllis, perfect. Thank you so much. Whenever you're ready.
Julia Kolchinsky Dasbach, Putin's February 21st. 21st?
Yeah, that's weird. 21st and
yeah.
Yeah.
Speech rewrites history, questioning Ukrainian sovereignty and making false claims, legitimizing it always having been a part of Russia. While this colonial narrative is not new, hearing it spoken in my mother tongue, Russian, while being myself born in Dnipro, Ukraine, and then reading and thinking through it in English has carried a particular sting and anxiety in the days that followed. I coped by taking on an erasure of all 11 pages of his drivel in order to give back some of the agency and voice I felt were taken from my birthplace and its people in Putin's twisted version of history and present moment. But today, thousands of miles away, safe behind a screen, as my birthplace is invaded, I have no words for the pain and paralysis I feel. I am holding my kin on this soil close and wishing those friends abroad on Ukrainian Sherry's, can't pronounce it.
Your guess is as good as mine.
Chernosm? Yeah, Chernosm safety. War has begun and I am terrified for what tomorrow will bring. I emigrated from Ukraine as a Jewish refugee when I was 6 years old in 1993. 2 years after Ukraine declared her independence from the Soviet Union in a referendum supported by 93% of Ukrainian citizens. While going through various political regimes, Ukraine has known sovereignty since 1991. I am aching at the threat of its loss, aching for my birthplace, her language and culture, her identity, for her people, my people, for the mothers who first sent their kids to school wearing stickers identifying their blood type in the event of military catastrophe, and are now sheltering from missile strikes in basements and subway stations. I'm aching for what I cannot change, so the process of poetic erasure of a dictator's language lets me reclaim some sense of power for both myself and my reader, if only for a moment, if only in the lyric space of the page, to reach for mir, the word for peace in both Russian and Ukrainian, even though now this reaching, this hope has been completely shattered.
Thank you so much, Phyllis. I won't add anything to that. I'll just let that sit with us for a moment. This is Mir in Ukraine by Julia Kolchinsky Dasbach.
Was there supposed to be sound for this?
Oh my gosh, you guys cannot hear this.
Mm-mm.
Oh, this whole time I was listening to it on my own. So let's see if there's, I was kind of counting on that as being a way for us to experience this together. I'm going to try this. I'm going to try this one more time with my audio out at full volume, and then hopefully you guys can hear this. Let me know though. Oh gosh, I'm so sorry.
An erasure of address by the President of the Russian Federation, February 21st, 2022, 22:35, the Kremlin, Moscow. Mir in Ukraine is country, and after a few words, history entirely created by Russia, severing what is historical. Nobody asked for war, longed for distance, found shine. Let me repeat, it's people, not a mistake. Admit them openly and honestly. Ukraine fully. Ukraine call. Ukraine go back to history. Repeat. It was impossible. Any future. Instead, bodies wonder why remain despite injustice. Ukraine, declare Ukraine, repeat Ukraine, reach Ukraine, gold rope, never. Ukraine open, Ukraine bind this dictator, striking Ukraine. Ukraine, I would mend memory, generations, Ukraine, branches, rivers, wave, burned. But we know Ukraine split is water, air, Black Sea, fracture is lack and lost in tatters. Ukraine, its root carries on. Listen carefully, please.
So everyone could hear that one clearly. Great. I'm going to pretend I did that on purpose and ask you guys what the difference was between reading it just without the voice and listening to the voice. Can you say that one more time, Catalina?
Painful with the voice.
I agree.
Feel each word like embodied, like in.
For me, just seeing it on the page, I see the gaps, but hearing her speak, it's more like music. There are rests that what looks like just a gap or an absence on the page is actually part of the music when she reads it. The timing of when she comes back in, or how slowly or quickly she reads words, or what gets connected. So it's sort of like the difference between reading a poem on the page or hearing a poem sung as a lyric to music.
Mm-hmm. I love that. The pauses are as important as the beats. So the space on the page, which for me is a hefty part of this poem, is that white space becomes the pause, the beat, the sound. I love the gaps. Gaps is such a great word. That's one I want to come back to. And also that great word that Catalina used, which is embodied, because bodies come up here too. So let's take a step back, and just so we're all on the same page, how did she create this poem? Literally, not figured. What did she do to make this?
She took his speech and whited out. She omitted, right? She omitted
Mm-hmm.
and she highlighted or foregrounded the connections that she was seeing in the words he was saying, but not intending to say.
Yeah. So this is a literal transcription of the speech and then white it out. And I've seen poems like this before, but they'll take like a black marker and black through some of the words. Here it's just white space, which creates a very interesting visual image of the poem. So what do you guys see in this? As I scroll down, what do you see in this white space, in the way the words are falling on the page? How does it relate to Ukraine or to peace in Ukraine, Mir in Ukraine?
Any space can be filled in with something else, I think.
I see the word. Oh, I'm sorry, Catalina.
No, please.
I see the words as bodies. There's a randomness to the to what's visible on the page. maybe the words are the bodies, I think, for me.
I like that interpretation. Does anybody see the words as something else?
When I look at it, it's very spread out. And so kind of thinking about what's kind of going on over there in terms of war and just all of this chaos, right? It's all over the place. Not really sure, perhaps at one point kind of looking at it, where is this going, right? Thinking about how that relates to war, what's going on, nobody really truly knows. And yet when she speaks, she kind of starts pulling it all together and we start kind of having more of an understanding.
Mhm. Yeah, especially I found a lot of understanding even in her, her author statement here, a lot of context, grounding us in a situation here. But I really like that idea of looking at the words as visual elements. We have them as bodies. We have them as placeholders for potential in Catalina's reading, and the white space as a placeholder for potential. What else, besides the content of the words, what the words actually say, what else do the words look like to you, or what else does the white space look like to you?
The one other thing, the white space to me is can be bomb smoke or obfuscation.
Yes.
And the words on the page are what remains or what persists despite that obfuscation, or coming through it.
Yes, I like that a lot. It makes me see also as the words as their own kind of bombs falling, like a way of taking back this power in a nonviolent way, of, I guess, to use an American idiom that may not translate, but to drop a bomb back, something truthful back. And I love the idea of the white space as the smoke obfuscating, and these words are what rise as truth through it. I love that. Any other visual reactions to the experience of just scrolling through this?
It's almost like there are faces there that I see at the beginning of it. It does almost look like, or even more silhouettes, the people, the way that it's taken out. I'm seeing them as silhouettes of those incredible Ukrainian people.
Mm-hmm. So more than generalized bodies, faces, people. That's beautiful. What other words or phrases? Now let's zoom into actually what they say. What do you notice here as a pattern or repetition, or just things you find interesting? And feel free to click on that link I put in the chat box so that you can scroll without having to look at me kind of scrolling all over the place, and you can scroll at your own leisure.
The thing that stands out to me quite a bit is how many times Ukraine is said within there.
Yes.
So therefore the strength of the Ukraine, to me, that's what comes across.
Yes.
There's so little mention of Russia there, other than in a,
Ooh.
taking on, but it's like the strength of Ukraine and therefore the people.
That's interesting that in a poem that was taken from a speech made for Russia, Russia is not actually mentioned, at least in this version of the poem. Very often it's Ukraine that takes center stage, which is a very interesting way to recenter and give voice. That I think is really very cool. What else? What other? Well, you know what? Let's stay there. Why else do you think Ukraine is repeated here?
This is really geeky of me, but just from a grammatical point of view, when she mentions Ukraine, it's followed by a verb. So it's Ukraine, I'm looking at partway through. Ukraine, declare. Ukraine, repeat. Reach. Ukraine, reach. Ukraine, open. Ukraine, bind. Ukraine. So it's a subject and a verb, an actor and agency, an actor
Yes.
and an action.
Yes.
So, yeah.
So what does that do?
It does the opposite of what Putin is trying to do, which is to take away agency that Ukraine is acting, is doing, is performing.
Identity.
Yeah. Beautifully said. It gives them the verb, the agency. And the identity, as Catalina was saying, will you keep going about that, Catalina?
Well, I was thinking about identity when I saw this Ukraine, and and I think it's linked also with what we read before, with what she wrote under the poem. And there, I think it is mentioned identity. This is why I felt it like it's about Ukraine's identity. And I think it's important that it's linked to agency, because it gives this, maybe it's too much say hope, but in a way, if I'm thinking back at what Kate said, like taking Putin's discourse and making it more like, how to say it, like, I forgot an English word, emphasizing the agency of Ukraine. I don't know if it is clear what I'm trying to say here.
Yeah. Absolutely. It's like an invocation of, as you're talking, it's making me think of all the ways that, so this is an erasure poem, all the ways that Ukraine is under a kind of its own erasure, right? The intent is for there no longer to be a Ukraine. So it's kind of invoking that identity over and over again, a refusal to be erased, refusal to be erased, claiming of it, almost like, almost here like a spell, even like a binding, like a true invocation, through words of, something that will happen, something that should be. I don't know if that makes any sense, but I hear what you're saying, Catalina. Absolutely. So what is Ukraine, according to this speaker? And I know we'll have to return to the poem to find out. So we have what Kate pointed to as the verbs, but we also have, see if I can find some examples of what they say Ukraine is or has, maybe is a better way to say that. Feel free to scroll on your own as well to find evidence here.
I'm just noticing, Julia, that that last line, listen carefully, please.
Yes.
With the dashes. I always think of dashes as arrows with the arrow tip cut off, pointing at what's between them. And the fact that that's formatted without any gaps in it contrasts so powerfully with the enormous effort that she's gone to as a poet to create a syntactic logic or through line from these fragments that she's culling from Putin's speech. And so I think when your question was your question, what is she saying about Ukraine, or what does Ukraine have?
What is it, or what
is it?
Yeah, what does it have, or what is it? How do we define it?
Yeah, this invocation at the end, listen carefully, please, which is an invitation, but it's also a command that
Yes,
it might not be easy to reassemble, or to reassemble this a sense of identity, but it is there. And it's very hard to formulate what I'm trying to say. Sorry, I spoke too soon. I'm not ready.
No. I want to return to this idea of the command and listen carefully, please. That was a question that I had, more generally about, what is the poem asking for? And I think that's one answer, is that listen carefully, please. I want to hear more about the dashes on either end, and visually what that brings up for you or for anybody else. Because I thought that was a really interesting train of thought.
It's the rest of the poem above that statement reads to me as it's almost scattershot. She's finding meaning in it. But that statement at the end says, I don't know, I think of battlefields of yore, and of the people who come out to the battlefields afterwards, and they're collecting. It's either family members looking for the bodies, or it's ambulance chasers, or people robbing the bodies, or whatever it might be. But that for me as a reader looking at this poem, I'm looking at a battlefield, both in this moment and a historical battlefield. And then at the end, there's a kind of sense making, which is basically challenging me as a reader or an observer. Don't stop listening just because it's difficult, just because it means you have to make the effort of reassembling. And don't stop listening just because news is fragmented and has been interfered with. Listen hard. Listen hard.
That's simply beautiful, Kate. Thank you so much. In keeping with that gorgeous explication, I notice it's central. Everything else, as you say, is scattershot, and this is centered. Almost, I see arrows pointing inward. This is what's important. Listen carefully, even when it's hard.
Reminds me a little, and it's that I'm thinking of the Maya Angelou's poem, And Still I Rise. That bit where, it's that part of it, that strength that, Ukraine might be in tatters at the moment, but its roots carry on. Listen carefully, please. We are going to carry on. We're going to rise. That's very much what comes across to me. And it's almost like, again, going back to looking at how it's been blocked out. That's almost like that's the bottom of the pedestal that's holding everything, that it's still going to stand firm. That's how that looks to me.
Yes, I love that the roots are literally at the bottom of the poem.
Yeah.
And those roots are what carry on, right? I love that. And it brings me back to the question we were just considering about what Ukraine is, or what it has. It has roots, but all of these images above, to me, also have that same sort of figurative language around them, of nature, of branches, rivers, wave burned. But we know Ukraine's split is water, air, Black Sea, fracture is lack and lost and tatters. So, there are abstract things here like lack and lost and fracture, but there's also real material country here. When, you have this idea of a nation that's transposed onto something material, it's hard to see the material thing underneath the idea. And this poem seems to call that material into being, the actual physical space of the Black Sea. And yeah, keep going.
The scary flip side of that for me is because the threat of nuclear interference, of a nuclear event overshadows this whole war. I feel the threat to even nature itself.
Yes.
From those details.
Great point. So what else do you think this poem is asking for? What is it asking anything of us as readers?
I was thinking about listening to Ukraine's voice, like the word to know what is going on and what is, I don't know, not exactly like asking for help, or like, I don't know if it makes sense what I'm saying.
So it's a kind of asking for attention and help.
Yeah,
and
like
to see.
Like it is happening, like, because it starts from the discourse and then it is about what is going on.
Yeah, a way not to look away from what's happening. It's happening, like you said. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Any other ideas on what, just gut reactions are fine too. What do you feel this poem is asking you to do?
I think that what comes across to me as I was reading and scrolling through it again is a bit that, yes, they're asking for our help, but they're not, it's not going to erase history. Yes, they're coming out of it, but they're going to go back. They're going to go strong. They're going to be strong again. And again, that roots bits that everything is being fragmented, but it's almost going to come back together. So there was a bit that was written, severing what is historical. Nobody asks for war. And then found, shine. Let me repeat, it's people, not a mistake. So, it's almost taking that they will find their way back through again and rise. And it really does link for me with that those roots are going to stay strong and ground them. And that even though they're asking for our help, that they're being displaced and people are moving, they're going to be going back.
Oh, that's great, Phyllis. So it's asking us to remember history, but also to remember people, the real people. And I love the word you use, displacement, because that's another way to look at this poem of erasure. It's another way to see what's happening visually on the page is the displacement of people too.
And while I was listening to Phyllis, I was thinking also about the way it looks, all words all over the page, like it looks like a puzzle who can be arranged in another way.
Like puzzle pieces. That's great.
That links for me, Catalina, what you just said, that links for me to the last line, listen carefully, please, that we have a choice as human beings not to relive this. This is happening to Ukraine right now, but this has happened to other people at other times. And what you just said about the puzzle pieces is very powerful for me, that if we listen carefully enough, please, if we listen carefully enough, maybe we can make a different, put the puzzle together differently.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Catalina and Kate. Very last question before we move into some writing. What do you make of the title? Does anybody remember what mir means?
It was peace.
Do you remember in what language?
Ukrainian and Russian.
Mm-hmm. Why do you think this is the title?
I mean, the people in a sense are very, they're kind of the same. I mean, just kind of looking on the outside, you know, all of it being one country at one point, right? They speak Russian, and yet they also have this own self-identity now as well. But just kind of like we're trying to divide them. We're looking at just Russia and Ukraine as two separate, but right, there's a lot of just bloodlines that run back that they're together.
What specifically pulls them together in the title?
The fact that they share the same word for peace.
I'm kind of looking at this as, right, so it's peace in Ukraine, but yet at the same time, right, this is from the Russian president, and it's the same word, and then this is the Ukrainian take on that, right, because it is kind of erased, and so it's kind of like finding its voice in there.
Can you say that one more time, Daniel? I want to make sure I caught it all.
Well, I'm looking at it, right, so mir in Russian and Ukraine is the same thing. And in a sense, right, kind of really looking at, you know, going back, like I was mentioning a little bit of the roots and bloodlines and how they were family. And this, you know, Putin speaks of this. And so she's kind of erasing aspects of that in order to show, right, once again, demonstrate, give voice to the Ukrainian people. So even though it's the same for both, she's like, let's pay attention to the, like, focus on the Ukraine, right? We're looking for peace. We're not.
Yeah. I'm following you perfectly. Yeah. And that's really, you know, that's the thing that joins them here is the peace, or the potential for it hidden in the word that they both share, as Kate put it earlier too. Which brings me back to that idea that Catalina had at the very beginning, as, you know, looking at the blank space as potential too, things that can be filled in, different ways to assemble the puzzle. You know, there's a lot of potential here. There's a lot of power here. I know this was, I promised that this question was going to be the last one, but I feel like we can't end the discussion without talking about the form of this poem again. After doing this close reading, looking at this form of erasure, which Daniel just gave us a great summary of how this erasure poem works. How does that form work to create a new kind of power or potential or space for something new?
When
In a way,
as I say, when I look at it from the beginning, just what they start to share, words history entirely created by Russia, right? Severing. And so it's kind of like this blanketed, this is the world view, this is what's kind of going on. And so by erasing everything, they're able to stand out.
So the erasure actually highlights things. It actually has a kind of ironic way of highlighting hidden moments of potential. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, in a sense, right? Just kind of I think you probably worded it better than I did.
No. I want to make sure that I got your meaning.
No, I mean that's part of it as well, right? And so there's these aspects that are written in here. The whole focus has been on Russia, and yet they're rewritten how they're saying, no, this is what this is really about, and we're just kind of like the Ukrainian people. No, this is not.
So it's a reorientation, yeah, of our focus from
It's
Russia
also-
to Ukraine. Go ahead, yeah.
Yeah, maybe piggybacking on that, again, that last line, listen carefully, please. It's almost like an invocation to listen for any of us, but maybe also for Russia, for Russian citizens whose access to accurate news is extremely restricted, that this is the way this poet heard Putin's address, and that she could be asking Russian people and the world community, I suppose, please listen carefully to what is being said and read between the lines for another way to hear what is being said, not just but what you're being told, but what it's inviting us to do a critical reading, just as you've asked us to do in this small group by sharing this poem.
Gorgeous, Kate. Thank you. It's a perfect segue, totally unplanned, but perfect segue to our writing prompt. Before I move on though, are there any last things that people would like to discuss here or explore in the poem before we move on to some of our own writing?
I just wanted to say that it seems I feel like it is more powerful because she could have just write a poem about what's going on, but she used Putin's discourse. So I think this makes it even more powerful.
Yeah, well said, Catalina. It's there's a word for that, right? Reappropriation, is that the right word? Where you take an insult and you claim it, you make it your own, and you make it powerful. And I feel like this is a bigger, much more powerful way of, not power, a much more nuanced way, I should say, of doing exactly that. You're right. She could have written something totally separate that was a critique of the word, but instead she took his words and in doing so created something super powerful, but also something that shows that there's possibility for peace. Really beautiful. Thank you guys so much for a wonderful discussion. So I'm going to have everybody pull out a pen and paper now. We're going to write for 5 minutes together. Everyone here has done this before, so I'll skip the whole spiel. You guys know how this works. We're going to write for 5 minutes nonstop to the prompt. And since I don't have my slides today, I'll just write the prompt in the chat box in case you forget it. What are you listening carefully to today? We have a little less than a minute left. All right, friends, when you're ready, you can put your pencils down. We have a small group today, so let's just do this together, all of us, instead of moving into breakout rooms. I will give you the same spiel as we give every time, which is just read the words on the page when you're reading. No need to give any preambles or tell us what you meant to write or didn't mean to write. Just the words on the page are perfect already. For listeners, we're going to listen for words and phrases that we find meaningful. We're going to take a note about them, and then we can reflect on the speaker's writing with the same attention to detail that we gave Julia in her poem. Who would like to share first?